Peterbilt's engine rattled like my ex-wife's jewelry box. All loose parts and bad timing. 23 years hauling freight across I-80, and I could tell you which truck stops had clean showers and which had watered-down coffee by the sound of the diesel knock alone. This morning it was telling me the Winnemucca station was about 15 miles ahead, and I needed fuel bad enough to overlook their overpriced lot lizard problem. CB crackled with morning chatter. Breaker 19. This is Moondog eastbound at mile marker 285. Anybody got eyes on that school bus convoy? They've been crawling in the right lane for 20 miles now. I keyed the mic. Moondog, this is freight train. ICM. 3 yellow buses with some kind of military escort up front. Probably another one of them FEMA evacuations from the coast. That's when I saw the first bodies. Not people, cattle. Hundreds of them, scattered along both sides of the highway like someone had dumped a slaughterhouse from the sky. But cattle don't travel in herds this size in Nevada, and they sure as hell don't move in straight lines toward the interstate. My CB lit up. All traffic, all traffic. This is Nevada State Patrol. Interstate 80 is now closed to civilian traffic effective immediately. Repeat, I-80 is closed. Exit at the nearest ramp and the transmission cut to static. That's when I noticed the school buses had stopped. Hazard lights blinking, pulled over on the shoulder about a quarter mile ahead. The military escort, 2 Humvees that looked like they'd been through a blender, sat twisted in the median strip. One was on its roof, smoke curling up from the other. I downshifted and pulled alongside the lead bus. The door opened and a woman about my age climbed down. Sandy hair, teacher clothes, and the kind of exhausted look I recognized from truck stop mirrors. "You the driver?" I called through my passenger window. "I'm Principal Martinez from Carson City Elementary. Those were our National Guard escorts." She pointed toward the wreckage. "Something hit them about 10 minutes ago. We've got 42 kids on these buses and no idea where we're supposed to go now." Through the windshield, I could see small faces pressed against school bus windows. Some were crying. Most just looked scared in that quiet way kids do when adults stop pretending everything's okay. The CB erupted with chatter, then died completely. Martinez was looking at me like I had answers, and I was looking at those cattle scattered across the desert floor, trying to figure out why they were all facing the same direction. East. Every single carcass pointed east, like they'd been running towards something when they died. "Ma'am, I don't know what happened to your escort, but staying here ain't smart. I've been driving this highway since before you had to worry about infected anything, and I never seen cattle behave like..." I gestured toward the field of dead animals. "Like that." She followed my gesture and went pale. "Jesus, how many are there?" "More than I can count, and they're all heading the same direction we are." I pulled out my road atlas old school paper because GPS units had been unreliable since the outbreak started. "There's a fuel depot about 60 miles east, just past the salt flats. Military checkpoint. If anywhere's gonna be safe, that'd be it." Martinez climbed back on her bus. I could hear her talking to someone, another teacher, maybe the bus driver, then she came back. "Our drivers are scared. One of them wants to turn around, go back to Carson City." "Carson City's where you came from, right? There's a reason you left." She nodded slowly. "The herds hit the elementary school 3 days ago. We barely got the kids out." I'd heard about the herds on the CB. Infected cattle moving in organized groups, attacking anything that moved. Started somewhere around Sacramento, spreading east like a disease. Nobody knew why cattle were getting infected, or why they moved together, or why they seemed to target populated areas. "Look, I can't make your decisions for you, but I can tell you this highway gets real empty real fast once you pass Winnemucca. If something's tracking movement, you want to be where there's less of everything. Empty deserts better than full towns." Martinez looked back at her buses, then at the smoking Humvees. Will you lead us? I almost said no. 23 years of keeping my head down, making my deliveries, staying out of other people's problems. But those kids' faces in the windows, hell, I'd been a scared kid once too. Back when my old man lost his job at the plant and we had to live in the cab of his rig for 6 months. Yeah, I'll lead you. But we do this my way. No CB chatter unless it's emergency. Keep your lights off once the sun sets. And if I say stop, we stop. If I say go, we go. Questions later. She nodded. What about fuel? I looked at my gauges. Half a tank, maybe less. The buses probably had even less. We'll have to risk the Winnemucca station. Pray to God it's still operational and not crawling with infected. As Martinez climbed back on her bus, I caught movement in my mirrors. Far behind us, maybe 2 miles back, a dark line stretched across the desert floor, moving, flowing like water, but water doesn't kick up dust clouds that big. I keyed the CB. Principal Martinez, we need to move. Now. What is it? I watched the dark line in my mirror grow larger. Companies coming. The Winnemucca truck stop looked like a war zone. Fuel pumps torn apart, convenience store windows spiderwebbed with cracks, and 18-wheelers scattered across the lot like toys. But the diesel pumps were still running. Automated systems don't care about apocalypses as long as the credit card readers work. I pulled the convoy in tight, buses forming a semicircle around the fuel island while I topped off my tanks. Martinez jumped down from the lead bus and jogged over. How bad is it back there? She asked. I'd been watching my mirrors during the 15-mile run to the station. The dark line had gained ground, close enough now to make out individual shapes. Cattle, thousands of them moving in a coordinated mass across the desert floor, following I-80 like they had GPS navigation. Bad enough. How many of your drivers know how to handle emergency driving? What do you mean? I mean driving fast in the dark with no lights while something's chasing you. Martinez went pale again. These are school bus drivers. They're trained for safety, not whatever this is. Through the bus windows, I could see kids pressing their faces to the glass, watching me fuel up the Peterbilt. One little girl, couldn't be more than 6, waved at me. I waved back. All right, new plan. I take point, obviously. Put your most experienced driver in the rear bus. He's going to be dealing with the most pressure if those things catch up. Middle bus should be whoever's steadiest under stress. Jimmy's got 30 years driving school bus. Rosa's been doing it for 15. And Dave. Martinez looked toward the third bus where a young guy sat white-knuckling the steering wheel. Dave's a substitute. Started last month. Dave gets the middle position. Sometimes being too scared to think is better than overthinking. I finished fueling and capped the tank. How much food and water you got on those buses? Enough for maybe 2 days if we're careful. Medical supplies? Basic first aid kit on each bus. I pulled out my road atlas and spread it on the hood of the Peterbilt. Here's our route. Straight shot east on 80, but we avoid the main truck stops. They're too exposed. There's an old mining road here about 40 miles out that parallels the highway through the salt flats. Rougher ride, but harder for anything to track us. Martinez studied the map. How do you know about mining roads? Same way I know which truck stops water down their coffee. Been driving this route since before you had those kids to worry about. I traced the path with my finger. The depot's here, just past the state line. Military checkpoint, hardened facility. If it's still operational, that's our best shot. A scream cut through the desert air. High-pitched, not quite human but not quite animal either. Both of us looked west. The dark line on the horizon had resolved into individual shapes now. Cattle, but wrong somehow. Moving too fast, too coordinated. How long do we have? Martinez asked. I watched the herds approach, calculating speed and distance like I'd done with DOT way stations for decades. 20 minutes, maybe less. Martinez ran back to brief her drivers. I climbed into the Peterbilt and fired up the CB. Convoy, this is freight train. We're moving in 5 minutes. Radio silence from here on unless it's life or death. Follow my tail lights and don't think about what's behind you. Dave's voice crackled over the radio. Shaky. What if we break down? What if? Dave. I kept my voice steady. The same tone I'd used talking scared rookies through their first ice storms. You focus on the bus in front of you. That's all. Just follow the lights. I watched Martinez climb back onto the lead bus. Through the windshield, she was talking to the kids, probably making up some story about a field trip adventure. Kids believe what adults tell them up to a point. The CB crackled with Jimmy's voice from the rear bus. Freight train. I got eyes on our problem. Jesus Christ. There's got to be thousands of them. Radio silence, Jimmy. Save the chatter for when we really need it. I put the Peterbilt in gear and pulled out of the truck stop, 3 yellow buses following in my wake. In the mirrors, I could see the herd clearly now. A black tide of infected cattle flowing across the desert, following the interstate with purpose that made my skin crawl. Cattle don't hunt in coordinated groups. They don't track vehicles across open desert. And they sure as hell don't move at 30 miles per hour across rough terrain. But these did. 20 miles outside Winnemucca, I made the turn onto the old mining road. The surface was rough, cracked asphalt and gravel that made the buses bounce like carnival rides. But it put distance between us and the main highway, and distance was the only advantage we had. The CB stayed quiet for the first hour. Then Dave's voice, barely a whisper. Something's wrong with my engine. Temperature's climbing. I checked the mirrors. The third bus was falling behind, white steam starting to curl from under its hood. Dave, how many kids you got on board? 14. I did the math. 3 buses, 42 kids total. We could redistribute if we had to, but cramming extra kids into the remaining buses would slow us down even more. Can you make it another 10 miles to the checkpoint? I don't know. That's when the first drone appeared. The MQ-9 Reaper came out of the sun like a mechanical hawk, engine noise masked by the Peterbilt's diesel rumble until it was right on top of us. I'd seen military drones before, usually flying high, barely visible, but this one was low enough to read the tail numbers. It circled the convoy once, then peeled off toward the west where the herd was still following our trail across the desert floor. Holy shit! Jimmy's voice crackled over the CB. Was that military? I cut him off, probably tracking the herd. But something felt wrong about the drone's flight pattern. It had circled us like it was confirming our position, not just observing. And now it was heading back toward the infected cattle with the kind of purpose that made my gut clench. Dave's bus was falling further behind, steam pouring from the engine compartment now. Through the rear windshield, I could see kids' faces pressed against the glass, looking scared but trying to be brave. Freight train, this is Dave. I'm losing power. Engine temps in the red. I pulled the convoy over on a flat stretch of hardpan desert. Through my binoculars, I could see the herd maybe 5 miles back, still following our trail with that unnatural coordination. And something else, movement in the sky, multiple aircraft approaching from the south. Martinez jogged over from the lead bus. What's happening? Dave's engine's shot. We need to redistribute the kids. How much time do we have? I handed her the binoculars. Look west, then look south. She looked west first, saw the approaching herd. Then she swung the glasses toward the southern sky and went rigid. Are those military aircraft, coming in fast and low? The planes resolved into F-16s, flying in formation about 1,000 feet up. As we watched, they split off and began circling the herd in a wide pattern. But there was something else in the herd, something that made my hands shake as I adjusted the focus. A human figure crawling on hands and knees among the cattle. At first I thought it might be someone who'd fallen trying to escape. Then I saw the others, dozens of them, scattered throughout the herd, moving with the same coordinated purpose as the infected animals. Their clothes were torn, skin mottled with dark veins, but they were still recognizably human. One looked up toward our position, and even at 2 miles distance I could see its mouth hanging open, jaw unhinged like a snake's. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. My CB erupted with military radio chatter, bleeding over from other frequencies. "Thunder 6, this is Reaper 1. Target acquired. Multiple infected concentrating on Grid 77 Alpha." "Roger, Reaper 1. You are cleared hot. Danger close. Civilian convoy in the area." "Copy, danger close. Civilian convoy marked. Commencing attack run." I grabbed the CB mic. All aircraft, this is civilian convoy on Mining Road Grid 77 Alpha. We have 42 children on board. Please acknowledge." Static. Then, "Civilian convoy, this is Thunder 6. You need to clear the area immediately. We have weapons hot and infected targets concentrated on your position." "Thunder 6, we have mechanical problems. Request 5 minutes to redistribute passengers." "Negative, civilian convoy. Infected herd will reach your position in approximately 3 minutes. You need to move now." Through the binoculars, I watched the lead F-16 peel off into an attack run. The infected cattle had picked up speed, flowing across the desert floor like a black river, directly toward our position. But there was something else in the herd, something that made my hands shake as I adjusted the focus. The infected cattle weren't just following our trail anymore. They were spreading out, forming a wide semicircle, trying to flank our position. And the human figures were moving among them, pointing toward our convoy with jerky, mechanical gestures. "Martinez, get those kids moved. Now." She ran back to coordinate the transfer while I tried to figure out how to get Dave's bus running. The engine was shot, but maybe it had enough left for a few more miles. "Dave, can you get any power at all from that engine?" "Maybe a couple miles. It's gonna blow the head gasket, but..." "Do it. We're not staying here." The first F-16 made its attack run, 20mm cannon rounds stitching across the desert floor where the herd's eastern edge was trying to circle around us. Dust clouds erupted as high-explosive rounds found their targets. But there were so many cattle that the losses barely seemed to matter. Martinez ran back. "Kids are distributed. Rosa's got 22 now, Jimmy's got 20. Dave's bus is empty. Tell Dave to abandon the bus and ride with Rosa. We're moving." But Dave was already running toward Rosa's bus, and that's when the infected reached us. The first wave came from the north, maybe 50 head of cattle moving at 30 miles per hour across open ground. Not charging blindly like normal cattle would, but coordinating their approach, cutting off our escape routes. I jumped into the Peterbilt and fired it up. "Convoy, we are moving now. Follow me. Do not stop for anything." The infected cattle hit Dave's abandoned bus just as we pulled away. Through the mirrors, I watched them swarm over it like army ants, but they didn't stop to investigate. They kept coming, following our new trail. The second F-16 made its attack run, cluster bombs erupting among the main herd. The explosions lit up the desert floor, but for every infected animal the bombs took down, 10 more kept coming. Rosa's overloaded bus was struggling with the extra weight. Jimmy's bus in the rear was keeping pace, but barely. And ahead of us, the mining road was getting rougher, winding through a landscape of abandoned equipment and old tailings piles. "Thunder 6, this is Reaper 1. Herd is reforming after strike. Still tracking civilian convoy. Request additional ordnance." "Roger, Reaper 1. Thunderbolt flight inbound with napalm. Clear the area. Napalm. They were gonna firebomb the entire area, and we were still in it. The CB crackled with Rose's voice. Freight train. I got mechanical problems now too. This bus ain't designed to carry this many kids. Through the mirrors, I could see Rose's bus listing to one side, overloaded suspension failing under the extra weight. Behind her, Jimmy's bus was maintaining speed, but the infected herd was gaining ground, and those crawling human figures were keeping pace with the cattle, moving with inhuman endurance. Rosa, how much further can you make it? Maybe 5 miles before the axle breaks. I checked my road atlas. The military depot was still 15 miles away, but there was something else. An old airstrip marked about 8 miles ahead. Abandoned mining operation from the looks of it, but it might have buildings, maybe defensive positions. Convoy, new plan. There's an airstrip coming up, 8 miles northeast. We're gonna ford up there and wait for the military to finish their bombing run. What if the military doesn't know we're there? Jimmy asked. I looked in the mirrors at the approaching firestorm as the first A-10 Thunderbolt came in low with napalm canisters. The desert behind us erupted in walls of flame that stretched across the horizon. Then we better hope those buildings at the airstrip are fireproof. The abandoned airstrip looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Cracked concrete runway, rusted aircraft hangars, and a cluster of prefab buildings that had been baking in the Nevada sun for decades. But the buildings were concrete and steel, which meant they might stop infected cattle, and the runway was long enough for military aircraft if we needed evacuation. I pulled the convoy into the largest hangar, a structure big enough to hide 2 school buses and a semi. Rose's bus made it about halfway inside before the rear axle finally gave out with a grinding screech of metal. Everybody out, Martinez called. Stay together, stay calm. 42 kids poured out of the buses, ranging in age from maybe 6 to 12. Most were scared but quiet, the way kids get when they know the adults are barely holding it together. I climbed back into my truck and pulled it across the hangar entrance as a makeshift barrier. It wouldn't stop determined infected cattle, but it might slow them down. Martinez was organizing the remaining kids, 38 now instead of 42. The empty spaces where Jimmy and those 4 children should have been felt like missing teeth. Rosa sat against the hangar wall, staring at nothing. She'd gotten 18 kids out of that bus crash, but she kept counting and recounting them like the numbers might change. That's when I heard the engine noise. Not aircraft this time, ground vehicles approaching from the east. Through my binoculars, I could see dust clouds, multiple vehicles moving fast across the hardpan. Convoy, we got company. Unknown vehicles approaching from the east. The vehicles resolved into 3 Humvees, moving in military formation but flying no flags. They pulled up to the hangar entrance and armed figures jumped out, not regular military, but some kind of private contractors in tactical gear. The lead figure, a woman with sergeant's stripes and a face like weathered leather, walked up to my truck window. You the civilian convoy? That's us. You here for evacuation? Negative. I'm Sergeant Zest, Blackwater Solutions. We're here to secure the area for military operations. You need to move these people to a safer location. Where exactly would that be? In case you hadn't noticed, we're surrounded by infected and the military's firebombing everything west of here. Zest looked toward the western horizon where napalm fires still burned. There's a hardened facility about 30 miles northeast. Mining company emergency bunker. We can escort you there. Something didn't feel right. The timing was too convenient, and Zest's eyes kept flicking toward the kids like she was calculating something. How'd you know we were here? I asked. Military coordination. We've been tracking infected movement in this sector. Martinez walked over. Are you here to help us? Yes, ma'am, but we need to move fast. Our intel suggests the infected herds have adapted their attack patterns. They're not just following noise anymore. They're setting up coordinated ambushes. That's when Jimmy called out from the mining office. "Freight train, you need to see this." I jogged over to where Jimmy was standing by a broken window. Through his binoculars, I could see movement on the northern ridgeline. Dark shapes moving in formation, but too organized to be random cattle. "How many?" I asked. "Maybe 200, but look how they're positioned." I took the binoculars. The infected cattle were spread along the ridgeline in what looked like a coordinated formation. Some in the center, others flanking east and west, like they were planning to surround us. Zest appeared beside me. "That's why we need to move. Now." But something still felt wrong. I'd been around military types long enough to recognize the real thing, and Zest's crew felt more like mercenaries than rescue personnel. Plus, if they had intelligence on infected behavior, why hadn't they shared it with the regular military? "What's your mission here, Sergeant?" I asked. "Civilian evacuation and area reconnaissance." "Bullshit." The word came out before I could stop it. "You're not here to rescue us. You're here to study those things." Zest's hand drifted toward her sidearm. "Sir, I need you to calm down and—" The CB in my truck erupted with static, then a voice I didn't recognize. "All units? All units. This is Blackwater Control. Target specimens are concentrated at Grid 78 Charlie. Prepare for collection protocol." Collection protocol. They weren't here to rescue the kids. They were here to use us as bait. "Martinez," I shouted. "Get the kids back in the hangar. Now." Zest drew her weapon. "Sir, I need you to stand down. We have authorization to—" I grabbed a tire iron from my toolbox and swung it at Zest's gun hand. 23 years of loading and unloading freight had given me arms like tree trunks, and the blow sent her weapon skittering across the concrete floor. "Jimmy, Rosa, we got problems." Zest's team was moving to surround the building, but they'd made one mistake. They'd parked their Humvees between us and the hangar entrance, giving us cover. Martinez had gotten most of the kids back into the hangar, but little Emma was crying, scared by the shouting and sudden movement. I scooped her up and ran for the building. That's when the infected hit. They came from 3 directions at once, the main herd from the west, smaller groups from the north and south. But this wasn't the disorganized charge we'd seen before. They moved in coordinated waves, some groups drawing fire while others flanked around. And scattered among them, those crawling human figures moved with purpose, reacting to the cattle's movements like some nightmare version of ranch hands. Zest's team opened up with automatic weapons, but there were too many targets and they were too spread out. Within minutes, the defensive perimeter collapsed. "Everyone in the office building," I yelled. "Stone walls, narrow entrance." We made it into the old mining office just as the first infected cattle reached the hangar. Through the windows, I could see them swarming over Zest's abandoned Humvees, but they weren't attacking blindly. They were testing the vehicles, looking for ways inside. But there were too many infected, and they were responding to something. Instead of charging blindly, they started circling, cutting off escape routes. And those crawling human figures were making sounds, guttural moaning that seemed to echo between them. "Jimmy, you need to go now. Almost got them all." The last group of kids was climbing aboard Jimmy's bus when the infected finally overwhelmed the perimeter. A dozen cattle hit the bus from the side, rocking it up on 2 wheels. Through the rear window, I could see Jimmy fighting to keep control. Then one of those crawling human figures reached the bus door. Rosa screamed. Jimmy fired his shotgun point blank, but the thing kept coming, pulling itself up the steps with arms that had too many joints. "Rosa, get to the back of the bus," Jimmy yelled. I watched in my mirrors as Jimmy grabbed something. A tire iron, maybe a crowbar, and started fighting that thing in the narrow aisle between the seats. Kids were screaming, pressed against the back windows. Jimmy managed to beat the creature down, but more were coming. Infected cattle were swarming over the bus now, and the whole vehicle was listing badly. Jimmy, abandon the bus. Get the kids out the back emergency exit. Can't. Exit's blocked. That's when I realized what Jimmy was going to do. Jimmy, don't. Take care of these kids, Sam. Tell my wife. Tell her I did my job. Jimmy gunned the engine. The bus lurched forward, plowing through infected cattle, heading straight for a concrete barrier at the edge of the hangar complex. At the last second, he yanked the wheel hard right. The bus rolled. It rolled 3 times before slamming into an abandoned fuel tank. The explosion lit up the desert floor, and every infected animal within a half-mile turned toward the fireball. In the sudden silence that followed, I could hear Rosa crying over the CB. She'd made it out with 18 kids through a side window before the crash, but Jimmy and 4 children, including little Emma who'd waved at me at the truck stop, were gone. Rosa, I said quietly, get your kids to my truck. We're leaving. Now. Martinez did a quick head count. 38 kids, 2 drivers, 1 principal and 1 truck driver. Everyone's here. Rosa was at the radio trying to reach the military. Mayday, mayday, this is civilian convoy at Mining Station 7. We are under attack by infected and hostile human forces. Request immediate assistance. Static. Then, civilian convoy, this is Thunder 6. We show no friendly forces in your area. Repeat, no friendly forces. Unknown personnel at your location are not military authorized. Thunder 6. The unknown personnel claimed to be Blackwater contractors. They were using us as bait for the infected. A long pause. Then, civilian convoy, Blackwater Solutions does not have authorization for operations in this sector. Treat them as hostile. Through the office windows, I could see Zest and her surviving team members trying to fight their way back to their vehicles. But the infected cattle had adapted to something new. They were using the abandoned equipment as cover, approaching from multiple angles like they understood tactical movement. One of Zest's soldiers went down, swarmed by a dozen infected cattle. His screams lasted maybe 10 seconds. Freight train, Martinez said quietly. What do we do now? I looked around the room. 38 scared kids, 2 exhausted bus drivers, 1 principal trying to hold it together, and me, a truck driver who'd been hauling freight across I-80 for 23 years and never imagined ending up responsible for this many lives. Through the radio static, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Thunder 6, this is Reaper 1. We have multiple aircraft inbound with heavy ordnance. All personnel in Grid 78 Charlie need to clear the area in 30 minutes. They were going to bomb the entire mining station. 30 minutes, I repeated, watching through the window as Zest's remaining team fought a losing battle against infected cattle that moved like pack hunters. That's not enough time to get clear on foot. Rosa was still working the radio. Thunder 6, civilian convoy requests emergency extraction. We have no vehicles and 38 children. Negative on extraction. All aircraft are committed to bombing run. You need to find alternate transport. Martinez looked at me with the kind of desperation I'd seen in truck stop mirrors during the worst storms. Sam, there has to be something we can do. I thought about my Peterbilt, still parked across the hangar entrance. Built like a tank with enough torque to pull a 40-foot trailer through anything. But it could maybe fit 10 people in the cab and sleeper, not 42. Then I remembered something. Old mining operations like this always had equipment yards. Heavy machinery designed to move tons of material across rough terrain. Jimmy, you ever drive anything bigger than a school bus? My brother-in-law runs a construction company. I helped him move equipment a few times. Rosa, Delivery trucks in college. Nothing big. Through the windows I could see movement in the equipment yard, a massive mining truck built for hauling or from pit mines. 8 wheels, diesel engine, and a cargo bed designed to carry 20 tons of rock. Or 42 people if you didn't mind violating every safety regulation ever written. There, I pointed. Caterpillar 777. Mining dump truck. Should have enough room for everyone if we pack tight. Martinez looked where I was pointing. That thing looks like it hasn't run in years. Diesel engines are simple. If the fuel system's intact and the battery has juice, it'll start. Question is whether we can get to it. Zest's team was down to 2 soldiers now, backed up against their overturned Humvee while infected cattle circled like sharks. But their firefight was drawing attention away from the equipment yard. Here's the plan, I said. I make a run for the mining truck. If I can get it started, I drive it back here and we load everyone up. Simple. What if it doesn't start? Rosa asked. Then we all die in about 25 minutes when the Air Force turns this place into a crater. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Mr. Sam, I'm scared. I knelt down to her level again. You know what, Emma? I'm scared too. But sometimes being scared just means you're paying attention. And that's good. It keeps you safe. She nodded gravely, like that made perfect sense. I checked my toolbox, basic hand tools, jumper cables, and a can of starting fluid I kept for cold mornings. Everything I needed to resurrect a dead mining truck, assuming it wasn't completely shot. Martinez, keep the kids quiet and ready to move. When I get that truck running, we'll have maybe 2 minutes to load everyone up before the infected figure out what we're doing. I slipped out the back window of the mining office and low-crawled toward the equipment yard. The infected cattle were still focused on Zest's team, but a few individuals had started patrolling the perimeter. Moving alone, staying low, I made it to the mining truck without being spotted. The Caterpillar 777 was a monster, cab 12 feet off the ground, cargo bed big enough for a house trailer. But it was old, maybe 20 years, and desert conditions weren't kind to abandoned machinery. I climbed up to the cab and tried the ignition. Nothing. Dead battery like I'd expected. The engine compartment was accessible from ground level. I popped the hood and found what I was looking for. A Caterpillar C32 diesel, twin turbocharged, designed to run forever if you kept oil in it. The fuel lines looked intact, and there was still diesel in the tank. I connected my jumper cables to the Peterbilt's batteries and ran the leads to the mining truck. The distance was just barely enough, cables stretched tight as piano wire. First attempt, starter cranked but no ignition. Second attempt, cranked longer, almost caught. I sprayed starting fluid into the air intake and tried again. The diesel coughed, caught, then roared to life with a sound like controlled thunder. Black smoke poured from the exhaust stack. That's when every infected animal in a half-mile radius turned toward the sound. "Oh shit," I muttered, scrambling up into the cab. The mining truck had maybe a dozen forward gears and took forever to get moving, but once it built momentum it was unstoppable. I crashed through a chain-link fence and drove straight toward the mining office, infected cattle scattering in front of the massive tires. Martinez had the remaining kids ready. They poured out of the building and climbed into the cargo bed. 38 children plus 3 adults, packed like sardines but safe behind steel walls 8 feet high. Zest appeared from behind the overturned Humvee, blood streaming down her face. "Take us with you. You were using us as bait," I called down from the cab. "The mission went wrong. Please, those things killed my entire team." Martinez looked at me from the cargo bed. Her face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steady. Jimmy would have taken her. Jimmy, the bus driver who'd sacrificed himself to save 18 kids, who'd told me to tell his wife he did his job. I opened the passenger door. "Get in. But if you try anything, I'll throw you out of this cab while we're doing 40. Zest climbed in just as the first military aircraft appeared on the horizon. Thunder 6, this is civilian convoy. We are mobile in large mining vehicle, heading northeast toward Salt Flats. Request safe corridor. Civilian convoy, be advised ordnance drop in 3 minutes. Clear the area immediately. I put the mining truck in its highest gear and pushed the throttle forward. The speedometer crawled up to 30, then 40 miles per hour, not fast by highway standards, but pretty impressive for a vehicle designed to haul 20 tons of rock. Behind us, the first bombs hit the mining station. The concussion wave caught up with us 5 seconds later, shaking the massive truck like a toy. In the mirrors, I could see mushroom clouds of smoke and debris rising from what had been our refuge, and Jimmy's grave. "Where are we going?" Zest asked. I pulled out my road atlas. Military depot, 15 miles northeast. Assuming it's still operational and not crawling with infected. "It's operational," Zest said. "That's where we were supposed to deliver." "Never mind." "Deliver what?" She looked back at the kids in the cargo bed, then at me. "Biological samples. For research." "You mean the kids?" "Not the kids. Blood samples. The military thinks children might have natural immunity to whatever's causing the infection." I stared at her. "You were going to use them as guinea pigs?" "To save everyone else, yes." Through the windshield, I could see the salt flats stretching ahead. Miles of white hardpan that looked like snow but was actually crystallized minerals left behind when ancient lakes evaporated. Beautiful in its own way, but alien and empty. The CB crackled. "Civilian convoy, this is Depot 7. We have you on radar. What's your status?" "Depot 7, we have 42 souls on board, including 38 children. Requesting immediate medical assistance and safe harbor." "Understood, civilian convoy. You are cleared for approach. Be advised, we have perimeter defense systems active due to infected activity in the region." I looked at Zest. "What happens to the kids at the depot?" "They'll be safe. Fed. Housed. Protected." "And then?" Zest didn't answer. As we approached the military facility, concrete walls, guard towers, and enough firepower to level a city, I made a decision that would have surprised my younger self. The Sam Walker who'd started this journey was a guy who kept his head down, minded his own business, hauled freight from point A to point B without getting involved in other people's problems. But somewhere between Winnemucca and the Salt Flats, between dodging infected herds and military airstrikes, that Sam had changed. These kids weren't freight to be delivered. They were people who deserved better than being used as research subjects. I looked in the mirrors at 38 kids who'd trusted me to get them somewhere safe, and at Martinez who'd believed I could protect them. Jimmy's empty seat in that convoy would always remind me that sometimes protection isn't enough. Depot 7, our cargo is 38 American citizens who've been through enough. They're going home to their families, not to any research program. The radio was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Civilian convoy, please clarify your statement." "You heard me. These kids aren't lab rats. They're not biological samples. They're children who want to see their parents again." Zest reached for her sidearm, but I'd been expecting that. I grabbed her wrist and twisted until she dropped the weapon. "New plan," I told her. "We deliver the kids to safety, you disappear, and everyone pretends this conversation never happened." "You don't understand the bigger picture," Zest said. "The infection is spreading. Without research, the infection is someone else's problem. My problem is 38 kids who trusted me to get them home safe." As the mining truck approached the depot gates, I realized something that 23 years on the road had taught me, but I'd never really understood until now. Sometimes keeping your head down isn't enough. Sometimes you have to stand up and be counted, even when it's not your job, even when it's not your problem. especially when kids are involved, even when you can't save them all. The depot gates opened, and I drove the Caterpillar 777 mining truck, with its cargo of 38 children, 2 bus drivers, 1 principal, 1 truck driver, and 1 very unhappy military contractor, into whatever came next. But that's a story for another day. Right now, all that mattered was that most of us had made it across the ghost highways of Nevada, through infected herds and military airstrikes, and the survivors were still breathing. Sometimes, on a road like I-80, that's the only victory that counts. 6 months later, I was hauling a load of electronics from Sacramento to Denver when my CB crackled with a familiar voice. "Breaker 19, this is Principal Martinez. Any drivers got eyes on a blue Peterbilt with freight train on the mud flaps?" I smiled and keyed the mic. "This is freight train. How are those kids doing, Martinez?" 34 of them are back in school. The other 4, well, we have a memorial wall now. But the ones who made it, they ask about you all the time. My smile faded. "How are you holding up?" "Some days are better than others." Rosa retired early. Couldn't handle the empty seats on her route. "Dave's driving again, though. Says Jimmy would have wanted that." I was quiet for a moment, watching the highway stretch ahead. Then Martinez's voice came through the static again, softer now. "Sam, there's something else. One of the kids, Sarah, she was on Rosa's bus. She's been humming this tune since we got back. None of us recognize it, but it's unsettling, like something she heard during the chase." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "What kind of tune?" "Hard to describe. Low and rhythmic, like cattle lowing, but organized. The music teacher says it has a mathematical pattern, like it's trying to communicate something." I pulled over at the next rest stop and grabbed my binoculars. Far to the south, near the foothills of the Rockies, I could see a dark line moving across the plains. Too organized to be a normal herd, too coordinated to be random. The infected were still spreading. "Martinez," I said into the CB, "you might want to keep those kids away from wide open spaces for a while." "Why?" I watched the distant herd moving with purpose across the Colorado landscape, and somewhere among them, I knew there were more of those crawling human figures, people who'd been changed by whatever was spreading across the western states. "Because I don't think this thing's over yet." The highway stretched ahead, empty and clean under the afternoon sun. But now I knew something I hadn't known before. The ghost highways weren't just in Nevada anymore. They were everywhere the herds had been. And they were still growing.